Is it normal to feel unsure and lost about my future in my 20s? It's a difficult one, right? Because you have to pursue your passions, but at the same time, you have to earn money. Hi there, and welcome back to our channel. Today's video is going to be slightly different because I am going to share valuable life lessons that I wish I knew in my 20s. And honestly, much of this has come from you all. So I've had so many messages on Instagram and TikTok asking me questions, and I've written them down. Like, what am I meant to be able to achieve by I'm 20? How do you handle the transition into adulthood? Tips for managing finances, all the way to, is it normal to feel unsure and lost about my future in my 20s? And what are some common career paths? Now, honestly, it is super common to feel lost when you're in your 20s. You're not meant to know much, if at all, everything or anything. Your 20s is all about making mistakes and having fun and enjoying life, but also learning from your failures and just moving on. The first thing on that note, therefore, is when you're in your 20s, you have to really learn to love yourself. Now, loving yourself isn't like, oh, I'm going to go and give myself a hug every day before I have a shower and then fall into sleep and then go to sleep with myself alone with like a face mask. It's not just self-care type of love. It very much is embracing who you are. So not being afraid of being your version of your authentic self. Much of the time that's very much not possible when you're hanging out with the wrong crowd or people who don't really encourage you to be your best self, right? So loving who you are really stems from understanding your passions, knowing your skills, thinking about what truly makes you happy and how do you fill your own cup, all the way to understanding how your brain functions and how it leverages how your intellect is leveraged, how your intelligence is therefore leveraged. That might be, you might be more creative, that might be that you might be logical, and that's completely fine. It's really what makes sense to you. And also owning your sense of style and sense of self. Unfortunately, with social media and the comparison culture, you feel like you have to just be on top of trends. Honestly, that isn't true. If you want to be, you can be. You don't have to be in a position where you are constantly just showing up to show up as someone else, and that's very much the point. That goes on to lesson number 2, which comes in twofold, or maybe it's two different lessons completely. Lesson number 2 is say yes to everything, and then lesson number 3 is say no to this bunch of stuff, right? Say yes to everything. In my 20s, I said yes. I said yes to doing that job that I didn't love. I said yes to hanging out with those friends that I didn't love. I said yes to that experiment. I said yes to that mistake. I said yes to that event. The reason why I said so many yeses is because then you figure out what you really want to say no to. So a good example is my first job that I ever had. I had an internship and I said yes. I was like, yes, you want to give me a job? I'm going to take it. It was actually in a recruitment firm, and I remember saying yes, but really disliking my commute, not getting along with my team, not because they weren't cool people, but because I didn't feel like I really added value, or I wasn't enjoying my day-to-day role. And also, I didn't like the ethics of the business. I used to travel 2 hours to get there one way, 2 hours back. This was pre-pandemic, right? So commuting was definitely a thing. But I remember after doing it for 3 months, that yes, eventually made me realize that this is not something I want to do. And so it helped me say more no's as I went along. Lesson number 3, say no. Say no to people who don't serve you. Say no to things that you don't like. Say no to ideas that go against your values and your ethics. However, and there's a big however, be okay with also trying new things. Now, your no should really come in the form of a boundary or ways that are essential to maintaining mental health. Mental health is a life lesson in its own self, but for me, like for a lot of people, mental health is a fairly new discussion. I'm not going to say that it was around 5, 10, 15 years ago. No one really said, how is your mental health? Are you feeling okay? And that's fine. That was back in the day. Today we talk about it openly. But if you are focusing on your mental health, then learn to say no and set clear boundaries and think about, what are my energy levels? Think about, am I being served? Do I feel fulfilled? Is this aligning to where I want to be in the next 3, 4, 5 years? But also say no to people that just don't serve you. A big part of being in your 20s is figuring out who you want to be friends with, right? And that's probably a whole different lesson in itself, but we'll take that into lesson number 4, is embrace real friendships. At the start of my early 20s, I did not have real friends. I had people that I hung out with that were cool for that moment. But I remember that when we stopped being friends, I felt like a part of my heart had been ripped out, which now actually is super melodramatic and should not have been the case. But back then it definitely was, because it feels like all your weight is on your friendships, and your friendships are absolutely everything. They are something, they're not everything. You need to be your biggest best friend, right? That goes back to lesson number 1. But your friendships really need to align with the person that you are and also the person you want to become. And what I mean by that was, I've always been quite a talkative character. I'm charismatic, but also, I'm quite confident as a human being. And whilst I was at university, my friends were like, yeah, that's super cool, we love that. And then after that period, they start to change and they start to pick faults in you that is actually just your nature. And that's you as a human person. And so at that moment, I didn't quite realize that they weren't serving me. So I remember I chased after them, or I tried to people please. And then I took a step back and I said, why is it that I'm making all the effort? Why is it that I'm sending all the text messages? Why is it that I feel like I need to change myself to please them? And so really think about quality over quantity. Some true friendships are priceless, but those true friendships, you don't have to show up with every day. You don't have to speak to every day. You don't have to only be there for the good times. And so just make sure that when people are your friends, they're there for your bad times too. And a lot of the time, people don't want to be there for your bad times. They only want to be there for your good times. They want to be there for your wins. They want to cheer you on. They want to, be your kind of performative cheerleaders in the background. But when you really need a friend because something's gone bad, I guess my question to you all is, who can you really call at that time? And who's going to show up regardless of what time of the day it is and really help you out? Lesson number 5, I think we've got to. I've lost count at this point, actually. Pursue your passions. It's a difficult one, right? Because you have to pursue your passions, but at the same time, you have to earn money. I'm not suggesting don't earn money, but I'm suggesting have like a criteria. So think about, here are my 5 passion points, and my next job or my current job or my future employer has to serve at least 3 of them. And that's very much how I look at things. I'm not trying to have a 5 out of 5 relationship. I don't think 100% of anything exists, and I don't think perfection is real. That doesn't really make sense to me, at least. And actually in your 20s, you're going to want to try and do everything that's 100% and you want everything to be perfect. None of that is true. And why should it be? If you are 100% of everything, then actually you don't leave any room for improvement or evolution or experimenting. And that's when life becomes really boring. So back to the point of follow your passion, think about what your passions are. When I started my career, I remember I did a Venn diagram with one of my mentors, and my passions were customer service and relationship management and networking and communication and problem solving and being creative and technology and business, etc., etc., etc. And then I also did a list of what my passions were not. My passions were not sitting behind a computer desk 12 hours a day. My passions are not going through and sieving out numbers. My passion also is not to be in the back end of anything, right? So when I went into my first employment, old job, we've already spoken about that, but when I really started working, I worked in the technology sector. I remember when my managers asked me what my passions were, I was like, I like to problem solve, I like to communicate, I like to use data. That was one of my passions. And so we were able to align my job role accordingly, but I had 2 more passions and they weren't able to serve that, and that's completely fine. Follow your passions and eventually everything will snowball. Knowing your passions, which obviously develop over time, also help you to recognize what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and that goes back to what we said previously about yes or no. My passions have now very much resulted in me having a BBC radio show, writing a book, having a YouTube channel, because my passions are very much forward facing. I like to communicate. I like to enjoy life in different ways. My passions also involve traveling and reviewing hotels and creating content, because that's naturally not only what I'm good at, but what I'm passionate about. And so I've built up that skill set. And so there was a question that came in from user123 on TikTok. And they said, how do you know what your passions are? Actually, innately in your gut, deep down, you know what your passions are. You know what you're passionate about, what you enjoy. But at the same time, if you don't know fully what that might be, you just figure it out. And that's where experimenting comes in. That's where saying yes comes in, saying no comes in. But also surround yourself with the right people. I made a video on networking, which is probably lesson 5, if we're keeping count at this point. Sorry. I made a video about networking, which is probably lesson 6. So network your way into what you feel fulfilled by. Now, fulfillment is quite an exotic word. It's quite a weighted word. It's actually quite new as well in terms of the language that we're using. But fulfillment is really something that fills your cup. It's what do you see as half full versus half empty. Again, you can't be 100% fulfilled 100% of the time. So it's what is going to get you out of bed on a Monday morning? What is going to get you doing the work on the weekend if you have to hustle? What is going to make you proud and make you excited when you talk about it? And a big part of learning about who you are and what you're doing, and my kind of, if not my biggest piece of advice in your 20s, is network. Meet people, go to events, go on platforms like Eventbrite and Meetup and Instagram and LinkedIn and Threads or Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, and type in things like meetups in London, technology in London, breakfast in London, co-working in London. I'm saying London because I live in London, of course. Wherever you are, you can go to an event there and go and meet people and try and, obviously, if possible, try and go to the free ones to see what you're into before you start paying for them. Payment is one of those things that when you purchase something, you're more likely to show up, which obviously scientifically you are. But I would say go for the freebies before you go for anything paid, and just see what kind of vibe is there and what people attend. Network and ask questions, right? That's probably lesson number 6. I believe we're at lesson number 6 now. Are we? I don't know. I lost count as well. But lesson number 6, stay curious, ask questions. There's studies to show you, it's around the age of 8 where girls stop being curious and asking questions, and boys are slightly higher. And the point being is, naturally we're curious people, right? So ask why. When you meet people and you network, ask them what they do, how they got there, what their career journey looks like, what are some challenges they face, what are some of their failures, their mistakes, what do they enjoy about their role, what makes them fulfilled, what fills their cup, how are they able to define success, what does a day in their life look like, right? Not just how much money they make. Money is like one definition of success, but that might not be yours. Stay curious, ask why, figure out how things are built, why things are built, how you can break them, how you can fix them, how you can evolve them, how you can improve them. I mean, technology, social media, YouTube, this video is nothing new, right? It's not like there's not a bunch of them that already exist, but I was curious enough to watch all the videos that existed before this. I then networked with my community to ask, what kind of questions do you want me to answer, and what do you want us to talk about during this 20-25 minute segment? And then I said, yes, why not? Let's give it a go. And here we are. And curiosity will really tap into new opportunities that you didn't necessarily have. Lesson 7, take that curiosity into financial literacy. So honestly, in your 20s, I wish that I had not only started saving earlier, but investing earlier, really learn how to grow your wealth. One thing that I did really well, and only because someone encouraged me to do so, was I opened a Help to Buy ISA. And so every month in the UK, I was putting £200 from a direct debit as soon as I'd been paid into the ISA, and now I have a good chunk of money saved. At least I have some savings. And so when you're in your 20s and you're earning money, before you even think about splurging, think about the 70-20-10 rule. So 70% of your earnings go on your debt and paying off any loans or bills, 20% go on your savings, 10% go on your expenditure, and just fun times out. So let's say that's £1,000, right? £700 goes on your bills, £200 in your savings, £100 on your everyday living and the fun times. Now, the fun times are not the everyday food or drinks that you have, but the extracurricular, like the cinema or bowling or to a concert or whatever that might be. It's such a healthy lesson, and I wish that we had more conversations around money at school and at university, or in whichever route you took yourself, but we don't. But actually at the same time, there's no more, we can't really have excuses anymore because there's so much information on the internet. So most definitely saving money, investing money, is what I would have started in my 20s. Now, I'm not saying to go and invest in crypto and Bitcoin. I'm not saying to go and, open up a savings account and put all your money there if you don't have emergency funds already saved up. So for context, your emergency fund is at least 3 to 6 months worth of savings in case there's an emergency, right? So if we've put that aside, then anything on top of that are your extra savings that you can then spend and invest and grow. So in summary, you're generating income, you're paying off your bills, 20% of that you're setting aside first and foremost to your emergency fund. Once your emergency fund is covered, then you are actually having real savings that are tangible in case you need to buy a house or you want to go on holiday, whatever it might be, and using that extra bit of money now to actually invest so you can grow your pot. I think we're at lesson number 8. And that comes with failure. And failure comes with resilience, which is obviously the name of my TED Talk. If you haven't already seen it, it's linked up somewhere. And why that is because when we're talking about saying yes and networking and staying curious and just being your best self in your 20s, including investing money, you're basically taking risks and you're basically going to fail. That's not me wishing failure upon you. That's just the truth is 90% of businesses fail. 80% of individuals fail their New Year's resolutions within the first 6 months. And so failure is absolutely inevitable, but we need to flip it on its head and say, you want to fail. You want to fail because it's a place of learning. You want to fail because it gives you the opportunity to grow, because failure is actually celebrating the fact you tried. And because without failure, you wouldn't really know what you're into. And honestly, your 20s is all about failing and making mistakes and messing up and knowing that everything is temporary. And then your 30s is really about cementing something and building those, kind of building on the foundations that you're already laying. Failure is really healthy. I mean, I fail all the time. I have failed with YouTube videos that I've tried to create that have not gone viral or even got the views that they wanted. I failed by investing in an app that I was trying to build in the background. And I spent about 5K on this app build, but it's 50% done. And then I got a little bit imposter syndrome-ish. And then I took a step back and I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready. That was a massive failure in life learning, right? What could I have done differently? I didn't have to invest 5K to begin with. I could have done a prototype. I could have done a wireframe. I could have done an MVP. I could have used different tech tools to speak to each other before we then went out to developers. And we could have gave the money in phases. As an example, I failed to look after my own sense of health. And that's why at the beginning it was not only be authentic to yourself, but focus on your energy and your health, because that's really important. That failure can lead to burnout. That failure can lead to resentment. That failure can lead to you making some not so great choices in your 20s, which will then inevitably come and bite you back in the bum as you get older, as the saying goes. Lesson number 9, always stay learning. This for me is really important. Especially when we're in the social media age and generation. There is nothing stopping us from learning. I started this YouTube channel in January 2023. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I have learned about YouTube, I have learned about SEO, I have learned about thumbnails, I have learned about optimum time, I have learned about how to use ChatGPT to optimize the work I'm doing. I've learned about scripting, I've learned about lighting, I've learned about production in ways that I didn't even know. So if worst case scenario, everything goes rock bottom tomorrow, I can add all those extra skill sets onto my CV, which fundamentally makes me more employable. I would also say read. Now, please don't just read all of these productivity books that everyone is launching right now because you want to be hyper productive. Diversify your reading. So read lists, read from different authors, read different genres, read fiction. I absolutely love reading a fiction book and getting lost in a story. And don't just read in a view that, oh, I'm going to start a business tomorrow, I'm going to make like $1 million overnight, and so I need to know how other people have done it. Actually read so that you're learning something new. So a good way of doing that is get a book, and if there's a word that you don't know, just highlight it and go and find out what it means. If there's a venture that you're interested in, as an example, we're going to start a jobs board. I've been watching YouTube videos around jobs boards just to understand how other people have done it. If there's social content that you're trying to create, as I've mentioned, I used YouTube as a main platform to learn about other people and how they've started YouTube, and I started mimicking some of their ideas and their designs to see if it works for myself. And that brings you on to lesson number 10. In your 20s, what people don't tell you is that everything is temporary. Like, honestly, it's temporary. That designer bag you're going to buy is possibly temporary. Your job is temporary. Your friends are probably temporary too. And what I mean by that is your 20s are really temporary and they're for the moment. In your 20s, when you're working, that's just your job. In your 30s, you can start building your career. And I only say that because in my 20s, I was laid off twice, right? Like, there's a bunch of layoffs happening right now. I know, I was there, I've been through it in my 20s. And honestly, at that point, it sucks. It makes you feel like you're rejected and you're not good enough, you're not capable. And it makes you question yourself. And that goes back to point number 1 was, as long as you're true in yourself, you're authentic in yourself, you'll be good. And so lesson number 10 is, things are temporary. What are you doing to make not only yourself last, but what's your IP, what's your intellectual property? Those are basically your skills. Those are your knowledge. That's your content. That's everything you're creating and putting out into the ecosystem. And so when people ask me questions like, what should I be doing in my 20s? And how do I get into this career? And what's the perfect career of choice? That honestly does not exist. Your 20s is about having temporary jobs, learning as you go along, trying different things, seeing what you like, seeing what you don't like, and then kind of making a list of everything you really are into. And your 30s are really focusing down them and helping them to scale. That's also how you're going to make those big bucks over time. And that brings me on to lesson number 11, negotiate everything. Everything is a negotiation. I don't know about you, but when I was younger, I used to go to the Sunday market with my grandparents, especially my granddad. And we used to hustle, we used to haggle, right? You'd buy something at the market and then you'd have to basically negotiate it down, even if it was a penny or 10 pence a pound. Take that into the workspace. Everything is negotiable. And unfortunately, women negotiate less than men anyway. And so we're paid on minimum 18% less than our male counterparts. Negotiate your time, negotiate your price, negotiate your rates, negotiate your commitment, negotiate your boundaries. Negotiation is key. But as I said before, if your job is temporary, the average person now stays in a role anywhere between 18 months to 3 years. When you are going between one job to another, that is your moment to really rack up that change and really to go and ask for that next big chunk of money based on the skill sets that you've earned and based on the skill sets that you're bringing into that business, the time that you're going to be there and your future self's worth. And so there was a point where in my 20s, I negotiated a 20K pay rise, right? I did. After 2.5 years of working at company 1, I went to company 2. I made a list of all my skills and qualities. I aligned them to the job description. I shared examples of exactly how I've smashed it and done more, how I'm adding value, but also what I'm bringing into that business because they need a fresh pair of eyes. I negotiated and I really won that case. And then my next job from 2 to 3 was a 15 grand pay rise. So when I say negotiate, I mean everything is negotiable. You just have to be brave enough to go and ask for it. Even when you're going to market stalls, even when you are building campaigns online, even when you are going out with your friends and family, negotiate timings and circumstances, negotiate when you're going to eat. This is different from compromise, by the way. For me, compromise, I'm not really into that word. And I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like it should be banned to some extent. Compromise is when someone loses, right? I think that's basically what compromise feels like, because you have to lose. For me, compromise isn't really something I'm trying to do in my own life. I'm trying to negotiate. It's like, what's a win for you? What's a win for me? And how can we win together? And that's really important. Lesson number 12. Your time is money. Your energy is money as well. Now, people have been saying this to me for years. They're like, your time is money. How much is your time worth? I'm like, what? That doesn't really make any sense, right? Your energy is money, and that's an asset. So if my asset is energy, and that is basically what people are demanding of me, and that's the request, how much am I charging that? Now, to simplify that in all terms, your time is money. When I first started working, I would commute 2 hours one way, 2 hours back. That was 4 hours of my day that I was just on the road doing really nothing. And when you price that up, it is taking away from your health, your emotional well-being, your time at home, quality and sleep and quality of life. But also there's a cost to that. And so really take a step back and think about, how much is my hour worth? How much is my day worth? And so is it worth my time? In the beginning, when I first started, I would do workshops that were £50 an hour, right? Today, I definitely don't do that same level of work, and or I definitely do not charge that amount, because that was right in the beginning, pre-experience. Now, in order for me to commute or travel or say yes to an opportunity, it really has to be a much higher amount than £50, because what I'm doing is I'm weighing it up to, okay, but what is that worth in my day-to-day? And if I wasn't doing that opportunity, what could I be doing for my own business, my own self, my own life? And that's really how you've got to think about it, is your time is money. Your time is also a sense of freedom. What could you be doing with that time? And how could you best be investing it? Versus just trying to say yes to things that don't really serve you. A few other things that I wish I knew in my 20s, and these are based on questions that have really come through, is very much about learning to let go. So when you're in your teens, you're super resentful, right? You're like latching onto everything that doesn't serve you, or being really unhappy and super ungrateful. In your 20s, you kind of take that in a level above, and you're still regulating your life and your emotions. But trust me, this is pretty much your last time to have a life without real responsibilities, because the rest of your life, you are just working and being responsible and growing and adding to the economy in some shape or form. So your 20s are really that moment of you letting go and being empathetic and opening up your vulnerability, but also just not worrying about other people's emotions and kind of issues towards you, but you just being in a position where you're super sure and certain about who you are. A big part of my 20s and maybe my early 20s started with a little bit of resentment, especially towards friends. And then at some point you get to a quarter-life crisis and you're like, what have I done? I've spent so long worrying about other people that I haven't spent enough time worrying about myself. And once you make that change from what do you want to actually what do I want, your life goes in stealth mode and everything changes. And a big part of that are the bits and pieces of advice that I wish I knew when I was in my 20s. Traveling doesn't just mean book a flight and go somewhere in Europe, by the way, if you're based in England, or it doesn't mean that you have to go on an aeroplane. Traveling means go down that unknown path, turn off your Google Maps and try a different route. It means go and explore places around you and unlock your mind. There's a lot of science now behind the fact that traveling actually unlocks creativity. It enables you to innovate new ideas. It actually provides a level of satisfaction and happiness that other things don't. But alongside that, it's really about being present. Unfortunately, with the rise of social media and everyone being online and trying to, just post stuff for the sake of posting stuff, we've lost that real being in the moments. So what you can do is you can go on a solo date. You can make sure that you're not on your phone or any kind of tech when you're going out for dinner. You can make sure that, 20 minutes a day, an hour a day you spend with yourself, be that reading, writing, coloring, drawing, or just staring outside. I have a feel-good moment every day when I wake up with a cup of tea, where I'm literally just taking a moment, 5 minutes, 10 minutes at most. I just look outside, I drink my tea, I'm grateful for the world that I'm in, but also the work that I'm doing. And be present. Being present also means just looking both ways before you cross the road. It means not being on your phone all the time as you're walking around. It means looking up to the sky and seeing how it changes colors, and just checking in with people. A few other things that I wish I knew in my 20s that I just want to share before we start wrapping this up is really figure out what success means to you. Now in your 20s, especially in your teens, you think everything is about money, money, money. And it is, money really is important. It makes the world go round. But it doesn't mean that millionaires are happy. If anything, that saying more money, more problems is a real thing, right? So think about, what is your base that you need to survive every day? What do you really need on a monthly to make your world kind of, shine around you? But at the same time, what is your version of success? My version of success is being able to cancel half a day of my meetings and my calendar because I want to create a YouTube vlog, or because I want to go and see my family and friends, or because I've found a new movie that I want to go watch. My version of success means going on really fancy, cool holidays, but not necessarily investing in luxury bags or cars. My version of success is very much being able to share my insights on different platforms, and success is not all how many people have watched it or the engagement metric or vanity metric. Success is, oh, you've done something that takes you out of your comfort zone and you put it online, okay, you're winning. And that's probably my final point, is don't be afraid to put yourself out of your comfort zone. Now, when you think about the questions that came through, I'm just going to go through some of them, right? Advice on handling relationships or friendships in your 20s, essential life skills, how to deal with imposter syndrome. Is it okay to feel like I'm comparing myself? Is it okay to feel lost and unsure about my future in my 20s? Yeah, a lot of that comes from putting yourself out of your comfort zone and just slowly but surely improving yourself, even if it's 1% daily. Comfort zone, or putting yourself out your comfort zone, doesn't mean doing this, right? And just like completely widening your circle. But it's like, okay, what's the small steps I can take every day? Is it a new recipe that I can learn? Is it a new food that I can taste? Is it a new destination I can go to? Is it a new show that I can watch? Is it a new conversation I can have? How about I take this different route versus the one that I take every day? How about I leave 10 minutes earlier and just see what's going on in the world? How about I give this job a chance even though I can't do 100%, because 100% of nothing, and because 100% of everything does not exist. How about I just give myself 30%? If I could do 30% of it, I'm going to give it a go. And I appreciate that maybe I waffled a little bit, but I think the point being is there's a lot of YouTube videos there being like, in your 20s, you're meant to be super hyper productive and you're meant to be super fashionable and trendy and online and social and extroverted and smashing it. None of that honestly is true, because if that's not your version of your 20s, it's not your version of your 20s. Your 20s are about making mistakes and loving yourself and figuring out who you are and how your brain works. Your 20s are about saying yes to things but setting boundaries and focusing on your mental and your financial well-being. Your 20s are about failing quite fast and quite regularly, so that eventually in your 30s, 40s and your 50s, you know what your focuses are. Your 20s are very much about having fun, but also just having fun with yourself and being time and giving yourself time to embrace the loneliness and the boredom that really does exist by being alone. And actually there's something beautiful in that too. Your 20s are your years just for giving things a go and not necessarily wondering what will come of it, but just celebrating the fact that you've given something a go and that you've started and that you're going to keep on moving forward. So that is my piece on things I wish I knew when I was 20, or you know, a bunch of life lessons in your 20s, or learning in your 20s, whatever you want to call it. But I think fundamentally, if you watch all these videos, including mine, they're saying the same or similar things, is your 20s are how you make of it. You don't really need someone to tell you how to live in your 20s. But what you do need to do is you need to start living in your 20s. Because honestly, life only really gets better once you've set those like really strong foundations.